we talking about practice. Not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
Welcome to another After Practice podcast with myself, Lake Lewis. I appreciate you joining me today. And as always, you can subscribe and watch this podcast. You can check me out on YouTube at sportsjourney.com, where the After Practice podcast sits. Or you can go on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, to name a few, but pretty much all the major, carriers carry this podcast. So appreciate you joining as always. And you can go to sportsjourney.com as well, where we give you tons of Commanders information and news. So listen, training camp is just a couple of weeks away. We're now in July, and fans are getting excited about what could be for the Washington Commanders. And, this was a football team that last year finished 8-1. And I think a lot of people thought that this was a playoff football team last year. I'm actually going out on record right now and saying that they should have made the playoffs last year, but they had 4 games where they just didn't get it done, didn't do what they were supposed to do, and that's why they didn't go. If they had made the playoffs, there would have been 4 teams from the same division, all in the NFC East. The Philadelphia Eagles, who won the division and went to the Super Bowl. You had the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Giants, all made the playoffs. Washington would have been the 4th team. They didn't get it done, however. 4 tough losses. 2 of those came against the New York Giants. And then they lost to the Cleveland Browns, as well as a game that, for my money, was inexplicable. They lost to the Minnesota Vikings. And that was a game that they were up, I want to say 6-7 points late in the 4th quarter. And they just decided to, go 3 and out, 3 straight possessions. They did not run the football. We all know about the turnout of that because Scott Turner, who was the offensive coordinator then, is now gone. And I think if you're the Washington Commanders, if you're a fan of theirs, you have to feel good that this is a young football team that's ascending. This isn't a typical situation where it's a team that doesn't have a lot of expectations and, they're young and people expecting them to lose. No, this is a football team that has a lot of young talent. And you sprinkle that in with some veterans, this team should be able to make the playoffs. And I think they should be able to make the playoffs this year. I'm going to talk about on today's podcast 5 things that I think Washington has to have in order to have a successful season. I had some great guests recently. I did a podcast on Friday here in Richmond, Virginia. Yes, that's right, folks. I'm now here in Richmond, Virginia, still covering the team. Still will be coming up to Ashburn for practices and obviously FedEx Field in Maryland for games. That's still home to me. But right now, I'm living in Richmond, Virginia. But I actually did a podcast on Friday night here in Richmond. I did it from Smoke RVA, which was here in downtown Scott's Addition portion of Richmond. And we had a really nice turnout, had, some great guests, had my best friend in the world, GeNienne Samuels, came on. She's an anchor here at CBS 6 here in Richmond. And then also had Sean Robertson, who is the sports anchor from CBS here in Richmond. He came out as well. And then we had a super fan, a guy that I see entering the stadium every time I get ready to go into FedEx Field. There's a gentleman that stands right off to the side, calls me over, we chat a little bit, and he wears a full Sean Taylor wardrobe, the whole 9. Super fan, Bobby Hutton. He actually came out to the event, and of course I had to get him on because he was in full garb. So we'll show you some snippets, so to speak, of our interviews and time at the remote location. 5 things that the Washington Commanders need to do, in my opinion, to have a successful season. And this isn't in any particular order. I'll let you decide how you want to put these 5. But I think these are 5 things that have to happen for this football team in order to be considered a worthy playoff, caliber team. So I think they have to have clearly better coaching. And, I talked about those 4 losses last year, those tough losses that, really were losses that cost them an opportunity to, make the playoffs and be that 4th NFC East team. You go back to the Minnesota game in particular. That was a game where they had the game in hand. There was a questionable, and I know my good friend Brian Mitchell, and me, we disagree on this, and Brian knows I'm right on this. But anyway, Benji St. Juste was called for pass interference going up against Justin Jefferson. And They had been battling the whole game, fighting and jockeying for position, and it just so happened to be in the fourth quarter, Benji St. Juste has a pick six, and it pretty much would have iced the game for Washington. Well, they called pass interference, and it came back, and then the Vikings continued to go down the field and score. Well, when they scored, Washington still had the lead. And I thought that that was the perfect time to run the football. You know, you needed to milk the clock a little bit, not play to lose, or I'm sorry, not play to where you're scared to win the game, but you still had the game in control. And I just thought they had full panic mode with the offensive play calling, and it was 3 and outs 2 times in a row, and gave the Vikings, who we all know, Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, you know, it's just a matter of time. If you hold a team that has that kind of offensive firepower with one of the best receivers in the game, top 5 wide receiver right now, just in his 3rd year, you know, you don't want to mess around and give them ample opportunities. And that's exactly what happened. And they lost that football game. And that was a game that I tweeted out from the press box that day. I don't know if they're going to recover from this. I don't know if they're going to be able to really withstand the pressure that's going to mount now, because you know, you win a game like that, you're in the playoffs pretty much. You lose that game, now you're, you know, stressing. Now you're putting pressure on yourself, because now you can't afford to lose too many more games. And then they followed that up. They lost to Cleveland. Deshaun Watson came into town, and I think that was his 2nd game back in Cleveland, you know, from his suspension. And they lost. And that was a winnable football game, a game that they were favored to win at home. So if I'm Washington, in order for them to have a better year this year, they've got to have better coaching. I mean, I thought Jack Del Rio righted the ship a little bit on defense last year. The defense was really lights out, played great defense towards the end of the season, and that defense was worthy of making the playoffs. It was the offense that kind of let them down. Well, how do you fix that? Well, I think Washington made the biggest coaching change in the offseason. And to me, for them to go out and get a coach of caliber of Eric Bieniemy, I think that's huge. You know, when you think about what he's done in Kansas City, and I know a lot of people say Eric Bieniemy did not call the offense in Kansas City. I totally understand that theory and that understanding that it's Andy Reid's show. Andy Reid, one of the best offensive minds ever in the NFL, and he's had some guys come from his tree. But nevertheless, even if you're not calling the plays, let's just say Eric Bieniemy wasn't calling the plays, he still was in that offensive game plan. You know, he was in the room where they put it together. He still knew the theories and why they were trying to do what they did. And he also knows talent, because he was the guy that actually coached, you know, perhaps the best quarterback in the NFL. Well, he is the best quarterback in the NFL, and he has a chance to go down as one of the greatest of all time, and that's Patrick Mahomes. He had one of the top 2 or 3 best all-time tight ends in Travis Kelce. You know, at one point, you know, he had the fastest guy in the NFL on the outside. So you think about the talent that he's coached. Well, they've won, and they've won with talent. So I think if you're Eric Bieniemy and you come to Washington and you see a Terry McLaurin, you got it. You don't have to feel sorry for him. Feel like, okay, well, you know, is he really that good? Hell yeah, he is. He's that good. You have him. You have Jahan Dotson. You already know where I go with that. He's another young player that's going to ascend and have, I think, a great second season in the NFL. Curtis Samuel, you know, a Swiss Army knife type of player. I think now you'll get a chance to really see what he's worth, because Eric Bieniemy likes to put all his guys who have talent, he likes to put them in space. And if you're a Curtis Samuel, you're going to get the ball wide open. You're going to get the ball in space where you can get yards after the catch. So I expect to see Curtis Samuel's yak this year go up tremendously, because they're not going to be giving him, you know, plays and possessions where it's not utilizing his strength. That's the strength of Eric Bieniemy. I've already seen it in OTAs. I've seen it in minicamp. I've seen a difference with this offense already, where it's going to be a big play type of offense. It's not going to be, you know, whatever's given to these guys. They have to make it happen on their own. You look at what Jahan Dotson did against the New York Giants last year. We had the 20-something yard touchdown catch where it was the great spin move that he ran into the end zone. I think this year you're going to see guys get catches where they're open, and now they can turn up the field and make things happen. I think you're going to see that quite a bit. So I think if you can get that kind of coaching from your offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy could be good for 2 to 3 more wins just because of better play calling. Naturally, it all starts with Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera, and I'm going to be the first to say this, or maybe not the first, but I'm going to say it today, first time. Ron Rivera, in my opinion, has done an outstanding job of bringing professionalism to the Washington Commanders. There's no question, none whatsoever, that this guy's first class professional. And he's brought that to the outfit. They don't have guys getting in trouble. They don't have guys, you see him in the news all the time. And that's what he was inheriting when he came here. There were a lot of things that were happening, off the field. Remember, they were winning off the field. Well, Ron Rivera changed that, and he got everything to be about football under the circumstances of a new owner, under the circumstances of a new name change, under the circumstances of lawsuits, of just dumb stuff that the organization was doing and letting happen. And Ron Rivera has come in, and on top of that, he dealt with a lot of this while he was dealing with his own personal issue of cancer. I think Ron Rivera needs to be lauded. I really do. I mean, the guy's done an outstanding job of bringing professionalism to the outfit. Now, on the flip side, I think Ron Rivera needs to coach better. I mean, I got to tell the truth here. Ron Rivera, if you look at his history as a head coach, 3 winning seasons in 12 years, a lot of us would be looking for new jobs, a new line of work if we were producing like that. But because of Ron Rivera's class and the fact that he brought some structure to the outfit, you have to kind of give him a pass. And I think that this is the year that pass will run out if he doesn't win. Washington has to make the playoffs, in my opinion, for Ron Rivera to keep his job. I truly believe that. Is he on the hot seat? I don't think he's on the hot seat, so to speak, like Mike McCarthy is in Dallas or something like that. But I think the seat's warm, put it like that. Now, if you get midway through the season and they're losing, the seat's going to be super hot. So he's got to win. He's got to produce, and he's got to put this football team in the playoffs. Naturally, Eric Bieniemy will have a huge say in that. Jack Del Rio on defense will have a huge say in that. But collectively, these guys have to win football games this year for the Commanders. Another thing that has to happen for the Commanders, listen, we all know quarterback play has been, symptomatic here. It's been something that they've have to produce, and they had a guy in Kirk Cousins that performed, but he didn't perform in the big games. And that was the reason why Kirk Cousins wasn't signed to a big contract here. Because I hear still people saying to this very day, the guy threw for 4,000 yards for 3 straight years. Yeah, he did. And he's continuing to do that in Minnesota. But when I look up Minnesota, not making the playoffs, Minnesota's losing the first round of the playoffs. They did have the one great run where they lost to, I think they lost to the Saints, if I'm not mistaken, with Kirk Cousins in the playoffs. But that was a nice football team. Nevertheless, Washington has to figure out their quarterback situation. And I think the guy that's up next to try to get it done is Sam Howell. He'll be in his second season out of North Carolina. He was a guy that while he was at North Carolina during his junior season, a lot of people were saying he was a top 10 caliber pick, that he could be one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks taken in the draft. Well, his senior year, he still had a really good season, but all those weapons that he had during his junior year, they had all graduated and they had all moved on to the NFL, where he didn't have the same type of season. It wasn't a poor season at all by any standards. It was a good season, but it didn't have the same cachet that junior season he had did. And he fell to the 5th round. Washington actually moved up to get him, and I think now you'll see if all that pays off. I think the last impression we got from Sam Howell was that final game against the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, he only threw for 167 yards, so it's not like he lit up the scoreboard or the stats, but he looked good. He really did. He made all the throws. His first NFL touchdown pass was a slant across the middle of the field, and Terry McLaurin gave him his first touchdown catch. Remember, he held onto the football for him as well. So that was good. Then he threw a deep ball down the field later in the game. I mean, the guy did a lot of things. We also know where he forced an ill-advised interception in the red zone that the Cowboys capitalized off of. But that's something you're going to see. That's a growing pain you're going to get from a young quarterback, especially a young quarterback that was in his first start. But I think fans should be optimistic because he started against the Dallas Cowboys starting 11. That wasn't, literally a football team that was coming in the game where they already made the playoffs and they weren't playing anybody. They had a chance at that 4 o'clock start for that game. They had a chance, hypothetically, to win the NFC East still. So they played their starters and he lit them up. I mean, he did a really good job, which gave fans hope. I actually talked about that with Sean Robertson, news anchor for, sports anchor for CBS 6 here in Richmond. I talked to him about that on Friday, and this is what he had to say.
You're trying to make me believe. I want to believe. I want to believe. I gotta see it though.
I mean, this is the time of the year, obviously,
Yeah, I know.
in June, July, where we're, I don't want to say, handing out Kool-Aid, but
Before I covered the team, if we were just sitting here shooting the breeze, I'd be like, I'm all in. We get 11 wins, we get 12 wins, division title, I'm there.
their number right now is 10. Bare minimum, it's 10.
10?
Yeah, I just can't see how you won 8 games last year where you should have won. I mean, they literally could have had 11, 12 wins.
True.
I'm not even going that far. I'm just giving them 2 more because of better offensive play call.
If they're healthy the majority of the year, especially the O-line, if they're healthy the majority of the year, I will give you 10. If they say majority. If
10
they say
puts you in the
relatively-
playoffs.
Yes. That would give you, I would say, 3 in the division like last year to make the playoffs. It's going to be Dallas, Philly going to battle for the division title. Washington,
See,
Giants.
I don't think so. I don't. I think it's Philly, and then I think it's between Washington and New York. I don't think Dallas is going to be.
Really?
I don't. I really don't.
Wow.
Every year we hear Dallas, Dallas, Dallas.
They won 12 games last year.
Yeah, but they haven't won a playoff game since
know.
when? You got to go back to when Washington was
A
last.
couple years ago, they beat Seattle in the playoffs, wild card.
So
I get that.
1 playoff win in 20 years.
One more, never mind.
Okay.
I'm not going to do my team.
All right,
but it's been
so real quick, Sean, just check out the camera right there and
Yes.
plug your social media for everyone.
Remember, on Twitter, it is CBS6 Sports Sean. And then on Instagram, it is Sean Sports TV. I believe that's it.
Chris.
It's Chris?
Yeah, so,
Chris.
I wasn't going to do it. Chris Robertson, folks,
Well,
remember.
Lane, Chris Lane. That's our running joke now.
Chris Robertson.
But it should be Sean Sports TV on Instagram.
So real quick, before we wrap the segment up, you also, this past season, you were calling games for, was it the MEAC or?
I called 7 games for VCU, and last season I did a few for VCU, and then I called 4 games at the Seattle tournament.
So you're going to be back on tonight at 11 o'clock?
11 o'clock, we're going to talk some Squirrels baseball. They are in Reading.
I went to my first game about 3 weeks ago.
What'd you think of it?
It was good. I mean, the fireworks show was awesome too. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was decent. I really did. It wasn't bad at all.
And they'll play, and then we've got a couple of area baseball players that are hitting at UVA that are actually playing on a U.S. national team. They were added to the U.S. national team.
Right.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. 2 area football players have made their commitments to play college football, so we're going to recap that, and we'll tell everybody what took place here tonight.
All right.
Got a lot to talk about at 11 o'clock.
So I'm here now. Gotta take advantage of it.
There you go. There you
So
go.
when the season starts,
So
everyone's
any,
like, "Oh, you
any
living in
Commander
Richmond?"
scoops,
I got
I'm
you.
giving it to you.
I got you.
Courtesy of this man over here.
I got you.
So as you can see, Sean Robertson feels the same way. I mean, there's optimism. He didn't want me selling it too much, but he thinks they have a chance. And I think a lot of fans feel like that. A different thing that I think that they're going to have in order to have a successful season is they're going to have better offensive line play. I think we all recognize that the offensive line last year was a little shoddy, but I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. I don't think the offensive line is going to be as bad as some people think, even though the same characters are kind of there. Yeah, the team went out and picked up Nick Gates from the Giants to be their starting center. They drafted Ricky Stromberg, from Arkansas, and I think he has a chance at some point, if not early, at some point this year. I think he will be starting on that offensive line, playing some guard. I think Gates is that good at center that they can't, move him. So then you put in Stromberg, who played center in college, but he also was versatile and he did play some guard. So maybe he moves over to that left guard spot. That's the spot right now that I think has to be the most watched. You have Chris Paul, you have Sadiq Charles. Sadiq Charles, came from LSU a couple of years back and has never really, got his feet under him. He's played okay at times, but he's just never really been able to entrench himself on that line. And they're giving him a chance now to compete for that left guard spot. So right now, that's the hole on the offensive line. I'm okay with Andrew Wiley, who they brought in from Kansas City as your right tackle. I'm okay moving over Sam Cosmi, who you drafted to be your right tackle. And I'll never forget this. A good friend of mine, Felix Trammell. What's up, Felix? We were actually at, we were at all the practices, but we were at one practice in particular, and we were looking at Sam Cosmi standing directly next to, this is during his rookie year. It's actually one of his first practices ever with the Commanders. And he was standing right next to Brandon Sheriff, who moved on to Jacksonville. And they were standing side by side, and they looked like clones in their uniform. I kid you not, folks. And I actually told Felix, I don't know if Cosmi's actually a tackle. Look at his measurables. His arms aren't as long as most tackles you like to have. He's kind of squat, big, strong legs. He looked a lot like Brandon Sheriff. Lo and behold, here we are 3 years later, and he's moving over to play right guard, where Brandon Sheriff made multiple Pro Bowls. So they're going to see what he can do at that position. I actually think that's the perfect fit for him. I think that is his position. If they can get that quality play from him at right guard, Andrew Wiley hold the fort down on the right side of the field. Now you go over to the left side. I think Charles Leno has gotten a lot of undue criticism. He actually has played pretty well if you look at the tape, if you look at the film like we have. He's given up some plays, but for the most part, I think a lot of that goes back, once again, to play calling. It goes back to when they were supposed to be running the football under Scott Turner, they were passing. When they were supposed to be passing the football, they were running. It just got to be so predictable that defenses were teeing off on the edges, and they suffered for that. Washington suffered for that. Charles Leno in particular suffered for lack of the right play calling. I think under Eric Bieniemy, it should be a lot better. I think his play will elevate, and you'll see why they brought him in from Chicago when they signed him as a free agent a couple years ago. Now, the question again is going to be at that left guard spot. So if you can get adequate play and you can get some of these pieces to come together early, I think this Washington offensive line actually will be a pretty decent unit for them. It won't be their Achilles heel. It'll actually be a strength of theirs if they can come together. All that obviously starts with Eric Bieniemy and his play calling. Another thing that has to happen for this team, GeNienne Samuels, my best friend in the world, she came on with us as well. She's an evening anchor for CBS 6 here in Richmond, Virginia. And she came out to the event as well, obviously to support me, but at the same time, she's got great knowledge. And remember, folks, she's the in-game host for this team. So you see her every Sunday on the Jumbotron getting fans excited. And this is what she had to say about the team.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we have a strong base of diehard fans. Yes. I mean, Bobby sitting here earlier, a prime example of that, a rally captain that's at all of the games. There's just so many fans out there that are diehard. And regardless, yes, shout out. And regardless, in all honesty, of how many opposing fans are at the stadium, we still support our team.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I love the most about our fans is that we really try not to let that type of stuff bother us too much. We're still going to be there. We're still going to support. We're still going to, hail to the Redskins, hail to the Commanders, and that's what we do.
You started that.
I did start.
I got to give you that, because I was saying.
Best case scenario, I would love it if we could win every single home game at a minimum.
Okay, so that would be 8, 9.
It makes my job a lot easier.
Yes. That's a good answer.
Yeah, so it makes my job a lot easier. For selfish reasons and for the fans, I would love to bring more home wins for sure.
Okay.
And then away, I think we'll probably win at least 25% of them.
Okay, so if that's the case, then that means 8 road games, so 25, so that would be 2 games. And then if you, let's just say you won every home game, that's 10 wins.
I'll take it.
You see the math, how we did that?
Yeah, I'll take it.
So
we need those 10
I did sit here and say 10 wins earlier. I did. But I wasn't using that theory, so that was different. That was, I might have to borrow that one. That was different. So 2 road wins, 8 home games, win every game. That's 10 wins.
Yep, 10 wins. And I can, just say from having meetings with, game day entertainment crew, we're going to bring it this season. It's going to be an amazing environment. We have a lot in store from a presentation standpoint. I can't necessarily say the name yet, but we have just brought someone on our staff as game day presentation, originally from the Vikings, and they always scored pretty high in the rankings for game day experience, game day presentation. Moved here and took a job at the University of Richmond, so a fellow Spider, which I'm excited about as well, and now we have brought him on the Commanders team for game day presentation. So it's going to be a different experience coming up.
Awesome.
So I just want all the fans to know, stay the course as you always do. I can't wait to see you on game day, and it's going to be great. We're going to get some W's, but we're also going to have an amazing fan experience as well.
So good stuff with GeNienne, as always. Another thing that has to happen for this team, that defense has to now become a top 5 unit. They were top 10 last year. They were ascending. They were doing well, and they did that all without of Chase Young. Well, Chase Young, folks, I can tell you, I've seen it with my own eyes. He's got that attitude back. He's got that swagger back. I know it was just OTAs, but he was moving like Chase Young of his rookie season. He was moving like the Chase Young of Ohio State. And remember, that guy was the defensive rookie of the year. So I think if you can get him back playing at a high level, my God, this defense could really be something. You look at, Quez Martin, who they brought in from Illinois to be a guy that's going to be in the slot on defense. That helps shore up some weak points in the secondary. You look at the ascension of Derek Forrest, another young player who had a really nice campaign last year. These are guys that have another year under their belt, so they're going to get better and better. Benji St. Juste, another guy that I'm really high on. I just think that if you put all these pieces together and Chase Young plays up to his capability, we already know that front is already really good. They have borderline potential to be great if Chase Young plays up to his potential. Because let's face it, if he's playing at a high level, it frees up Montez Sweat on the other side, who had a really decent season last year. And both those guys are in contract situations, so they're going to be playing hard to get the money. So you pair those guys up out there, teeing it off with John Allen and Deron Payne in the trenches. I don't see how this defense can't be better. Think about it. You have the kid Mathis, who was there, one of the top draft picks from a year ago. Obviously, the first game of the season is against Jacksonville. He gets hurt in the first quarter and was out for the rest of the season. But now he's back looking healthy, looking sharp. So now you have depth. You have a guy that can come in and spell John Allen, a guy that can come in and spell Deron Payne in the trenches. Then, you have Casey Ridgeway. I mean, you have all these different players that they can bring in. They have depth. They went out and drafted another edge rusher from Clemson. So I'm thinking that Washington right now, they have a lot of talent on that defense, a lot of pieces that if they can put it all together and not wait till the season's progressing, but just do it from day one. Come out against Arizona, kick them in the teeth, put them to sleep early, and you kind of create a buzz about yourself. You kind of put a fear factor in opponents where they're not saying, well, these guys have never lived up to the hype, they're no good. I mean, you go out and you do what you're supposed to do against Arizona early. Colt McCoy will be coming back into town. It won't be Kyler Murray. That's a team you're supposed to punish in week 1. It's supposed to be a boisterous crowd, new ownership. Everyone's going to be happy. Put that team to sleep and get that defense, get that fear of people, as far as what this defense can do. Speaking of new ownership, that's the other thing that has to happen for Washington this year. Not new ownership, but just stability, just professionalism, class from the ownership group. We all know Dan Snyder dropped the ball long time ago and gutted a once proud franchise. Just no getting way around it. He gutted it. He made, a blueprint for how you run an organization, how you win championships, how you are about your community and how you bring everybody together on Sundays. That was Washington. Yes, it was. Well, they become a laughingstock. They become an away game for themselves at home. It's been that bad where the opposing team's fans make up 70-75% of the crowd in FedEx Field. Well, you need to change that. You need to get that to be different. So if your ownership, you come in, show some class, show some dignity, pride in what we have. And then on top of that, you don't you don't sell to the opposing team's fans to get your sellouts. You do something to make people want to come to FedEx and support this team. And that's called winning. It's called pride. It's called being part of the community as ownership. And I think it's going to be safe to say with Magic Johnson as a minority owner in this, literally and figuratively, I think that's good for what they're going to be able to do here. I really think it's a good look for them. And they have owners. All three of these owners, have sports backgrounds as far as owning other professional teams. And Magic, of course, being a Hall of Fame point guard from the LA Lakers. These guys know how to win, and they know what it takes to win. Now they just have to prove that they can do it at the NFL level, win a championship, and bring one back to Washington, which would be the biggest story in all of DC if that were to happen. So that's something that has to happen. I mentioned during the podcast on Friday that I had a friend, a person that I consider a friend, a person that I've, got a chance to briefly know just from my time entering the stadium and exiting the stadium on Sundays. And this super fan's always there, and he would always call me over and I'd chat with him for a little bit. And as I've always said, man, if you don't have fans, you don't have a job. That's just the way it goes. The fans help make all of us, not just the players on the field, but us in the media who cover this team as well. And I've always been greatly appreciative of all the fans. And this gentleman in particular, wanted to come out to the podcast. I asked him to come out. I invited him to come out. And I told him, if you come out, I'm going to bring you on. And he did just that, honored his word. I had him come on, and we had a great time. And, this was some of his thoughts on the burgundy and gold.
That's a good question. If we're talking about leather helmet, my favorite autograph would have to be Alfred Morris.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because back in 2012, he gave me tickets to the Viking game.
Nice.
And that was the game.
Sounds like Alfred.
Yeah. That was the game that RG3 had the long touchdown run. So that was a pretty cool experience for me. That's my favorite autograph from that helmet.
Okay.
I haven't finished my other helmet yet, the Bobby Hutton helmet that I created for myself. So once I finish that, then I'll have a favorite autograph. And I don't have one for this one either, but I just started working on this one.
Okay. So the goal is to not have any burgundy seen on that helmet, or have none of the signatures.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
So do you have an all-time favorite player?
All-time favorite player, Jason Campbell.
Jason Campbell.
Yeah, I like Jason
I was
Campbell.
not expecting to hear that at all.
I like Jason Campbell.
And that's my guy too. We do podcasts sometimes together. He's down in Auburn.
Yeah.
He's actually, I think now he's calling the games
Yeah,
now.
I saw that. Yeah, Instagram.
Yeah. So Jason Campbell, why Jason Campbell? I'm curious.
Because of what he went through in Washington, and he was a good quarterback in my opinion. I felt like we gave up on him too early, and we traded him for Donovan McNabb. It's something I'll never forgive the team for doing. His quarterback rating was going up every year.
Every year.
And then we traded him away for just Donovan McNabb. We traded him in the second round pick for Donovan McNabb.
An older Donovan.
Right,
Who had
exactly.
seen his better
and
days.
I want to say he was only with us for like a year or two. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So I'm still upset about that.
Okay. I mean, that's what's up, man. I mean, that's what's up. So Jason Campbell, I've asked that question to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And Jason, you're my dude, but never have I heard that come up. So I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna put you in touch with Jason. That'll be a good look for you. Uniform. I gotta ask you.
Yes, sir.
Do you like the new uniforms?
Which color?
You like the black uniform?
Yes.
You do.
I like the black one the most.
You like the black helmet with the W in the front, though?
Yeah, it's fine. It's simple. I like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the burgundy helmet now, the matte helmet.
Yeah, the matte finish is
I love that. I think that's good. But I'm not a big fan of the unis though.
You're not?
No, I thought they should have just kept what they had.
Yeah.
Just took Redskins off, put Commanders on it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean,
For nostalgia reasons, I think maybe I'm a little bit stuck on this stuff, but
when I first saw the uniforms, I really didn't like the white one too much. It didn't draw me. I like the burgundy and gold ones. I think we could have kind of kept our colors. Our colors kind of changed a little bit.
okay.
But I like the black ones. They're my favorite. So, I mean, it is what it is. I don't really have to.
So there you have it. Bobby Hutton came on. Nice garb, right? I asked him how much he paid for that helmet. I won't tell you, but listen, the guy replicated a Sean Taylor helmet. That's if you want to replicate something, that's the one you want to replicate because it was so unique the way Sean Taylor would put the tape on his face mask, on his fingers. Just one of the greatest players that this organization has ever had, and obviously, and unfortunately, his time here was cut way too short. Not just from football, but just from being a father, being a husband, being a son, and then naturally being a Washington Redskin at the time. So the organization has never really recovered from his untimely passing, but they can still honor him. And I do think, even though it's not one of my top 5 things that needs to happen for this team to have a successful season, something that does need to happen for them is they need to change that Sean Taylor statue, because that's not a statue. It looks like a mannequin that they pulled out of Target. So they need to change that and get a better setup to honor a great football player. Look, folks, as always, I greatly appreciate you spending time with me on today's podcast. There's going to be so much more coming up soon. And as always, like I said, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Deezer, you name it. It's on all the major podcast carriers. And then, of course, you can watch this on YouTube from sportsjourney.com and then on sportsjourney.com. So as always, I appreciate you taking time with me today. Have a great holiday, 4th of July. Be safe, because you know how those fireworks sometimes can happen. So just be safe with whatever you're doing. And as always, enjoy your time with your family and your friends. Take care, and we'll see you soon.